Welcome to the None But Curious podcast. We're all about finding inspiration in life's uncertainties. Whether you're still figuring things out, questioning your beliefs, or just curious about the world, come hang out with us as we celebrate the beauty of not having all the answers. Vulnerability. It's a word that tends to stir up a mix of emotions. For many, the mere idea of being vulnerable can feel overwhelming. It exposes us to uncertainty, emotional risk, and the potential of rejection. Yet, despite all the discomfort that comes with it, vulnerability holds the power to unlock deeper connections, trust, and personal growth. How do we approach vulnerability if we don't lean on religious or spiritual beliefs for comfort? Vulnerability is a fundamental part of the human experience. It's not about putting faith in a higher power to protect us when we open up. It's about facing the raw realities of life as they are. Vulnerability then becomes an exploration of our own humanity, an exploration that helps us grow from the inside out. In this episode, we'll dive into why vulnerability can feel so difficult, look at some practical ways to embrace it, and explore activities that can help us practice being vulnerable. In a world where not everyone subscribes to a specific spiritual or religious belief system, vulnerability takes on a more grounded meaning. It's not about destiny or divine intervention. It's about facing the truth that life is full of uncertainty and emotional exposure is part of it. For those who identify as agnostic, meaning they neither fully embrace nor reject the existence of a higher power, vulnerability is a shared human experience. It's about being honest with ourselves and others about what we feel and what we fear without expecting the universe to provide a safety net. Similarly, being a spiritual nun, someone who doesn't subscribe to any particular spiritual or religious beliefs, often means confronting life's uncertainties with a sense of personal responsibility and inner strength. Both perspectives involve navigating our doubts and insecurities with openness and authenticity, drawing on our own resources to find meaning and resilience. This perspective can be empowering because it puts the focus on what we can control, our responses to life's unpredictability. While vulnerability can be scary, it's a normal, inevitable part of being alive. Whether we're worried about a relationship, uncertain about our career, or nervous about sharing our thoughts, vulnerability is something we all face. Being vulnerable isn't exactly a walk in the park. It's hard for a reason. Our natural instinct is to protect ourselves from getting hurt, rejected, or judged. Vulnerability feels risky because it forces us to step out from behind the safety of our emotional walls. Whether we're afraid of failing, being criticized, or showing weakness, these fears can keep us from taking emotional risks or being our true selves. This fear makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Our ancestors needed to stay guarded to survive in the face of actual threats. These days, this instinct can prevent us from forming real connections with others and experiencing personal growth. There's no guarantee that things will go perfectly when we let ourselves be vulnerable. That's where the beauty lies. Choosing vulnerability in the face of uncertainty can lead to authenticity and deeper relationships. And if vulnerability is such a fundamental part of being human, how do we go about accepting it? Here are some practical methods to help us face vulnerability head on. 1. Practicing mindfulness and self-awareness. Mindfulness is all about being present with your emotions and thoughts without judging them. It can help us notice what we're feeling when vulnerability creeps in, whether it's anxiety, fear, or self-doubt. By becoming more self-aware, we can learn to recognize these feelings without trying to push them away. Jon Kabat-Zinn's Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR, is a well-known secular approach to mindfulness. MBSR blends mindfulness meditation and yoga to help us become more aware of the present moment. It teaches us to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, encouraging us to stay with our emotions rather than avoid them. This approach is especially helpful for handling vulnerability, as it allows us to fully experience our emotions without letting them take over or define who we are. By practicing mindfulness, we learned that emotions are fleeting and we don't need to be defined by our vulnerable moments. Instead, we can approach these experiences with acceptance and curiosity, which helps us manage them better and build greater emotional resilience. So try this. Spend 10 to 15 minutes each day practicing mindfulness. Find a quiet place, sit down, and focus on your breathing. When thoughts or feelings of vulnerability come up, simply observe them without trying to change or push them away. Over time, this practice helps us become more comfortable with uncomfortable emotions like vulnerability. Two, challenging negative beliefs with cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is an incredibly effective method for tackling vulnerability, especially when it's rooted in unhelpful thoughts. CBT operates on the idea that our thoughts affect our emotions and behaviors. If we believe that being vulnerable makes us weak or that opening up will lead to rejection, we're more likely to avoid being vulnerable. A study from 2020 shows that CBT can reduce social anxiety by helping people change their thoughts about vulnerability. By reframing vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness, it becomes easier to embrace it. Try this. Start a journal and write about situations where you felt vulnerable. List the automatic thoughts you had at that moment and then challenge them. For instance, if you thought, if I ask for help, people will think I'm incompetent, ask yourself, is that really true? Doing this regularly can help change how you perceive vulnerability. Now, I did look to see if there was some sort of reframing app on the phone, and I couldn't find one. So I opted to test ChatGPT. Whatever your feelings about ChatGPT are, I invite you to take some of your critical self thoughts and ask to reframe them in a more positive manner. Kind of interesting what it spits out. Number three, gradually exposing yourself to vulnerability. Like many fears, vulnerability can be eased through gradual exposure. By taking small emotional risks over time, we can slowly increase our tolerance for vulnerability. This method is particularly helpful for people who struggle with social anxiety or fear of rejection. Taking little steps like sharing a personal story with a friend or admitting when you've made a mistake can build your confidence over time. Try this vulnerability challenge. Write down a list of small, manageable acts of vulnerability, like sharing a personal fear with a close friend or asking for feedback on something you've been working on. Other suggestions include discussing a mistake you made, admitting when you don't know something, or expressing that you need a break. Try doing one of these each week and notice how you feel afterward. Was it as scary as you thought? Or did the outcome surprise you? Four, cultivating self compassion. Self compassion is all about treating yourself with kindness, especially when you're feeling vulnerable or inadequate. Often, we're much harder on ourselves than we are on others. Practicing self compassion can help us embrace vulnerability without the harsh self judgment that often comes with it. By offering yourself the same understanding you'd give a close friend, you can start to shift the way you think about vulnerability. It becomes less about exposing your weaknesses and more about being human. Try this. The next time you're feeling vulnerable, take a moment to pause. Acknowledge that you're going through a tough time and remind yourself it's okay to feel this way. You can use a simple self compassion mantra like, this is a tough moment, but it's part of being human. May I be kind to myself in this moment? Practicing this can help change the way you respond to vulnerability. Number five, building trust in relationships. Vulnerability shows up most often in our relationships, whether they're romantic, familial, or platonic. Building trust with others allows us to feel safe enough to open up and be vulnerable. Trust takes time, and it's built through consistent acts of honesty and openness. A 2017 study found that multiple vulnerability is key to building deep, meaningful connections. Sharing personal aspects of ourselves with someone else helps foster a closeness that goes beyond surface level relationships. Try this. Gather a group of close friends or family members and create a sharing circle. Each person takes a turn sharing something vulnerable, whether it's a recent fear, personal challenge, or a mistake. The goal is to listen and share without judgment. It's a great way to practice being open and to see that vulnerability is something we all experience. We all experience. Number six, expressing yourself creatively. Creative expression is another way to practice vulnerability in a low stakes environment. When we create, whether through writing, painting, or music, we expose a part of ourselves. Sharing that creation with others invites feedback and can feel risky, but it's also a powerful way to embrace vulnerability. Elizabeth Gilbert, best known for her bestseller Eat, Pray, Love, delves into the complexities of the creative process in her book Big Magic. Drawing from her own experiences and conversations with other authors and artists, Gilbert explores subjects including facing fear, embracing curiosity, and the significance of inspiration. She makes the case that although fear is a normal component of creativity, it shouldn't stop us from being creative. Gilbert views curiosity as a key component of creativity and encourages readers to follow their curiosity and maintain an open mind. He also talks about how inspiration can come at any time and stresses the value of always showing up and working hard, regardless of how or when inspiration strikes. Try this. Pick a creative project you're passionate about. Maybe write a poem, paint a picture, or even record a song. Then share it with someone else, even if it doesn't feel perfect. The goal is to practice letting yourself be seen through your work and invite feedback as a tool for growth, not judgment. 7. Setting boundaries and engaging in open communication. Nedra Glover Tawwab is a therapist, speaker, and best-selling author specializing in boundary setting, emotional health, and fostering healthy relationships. Her work focuses on helping individuals manage vulnerability and emotional discomfort by encouraging open communication and establishing clear boundaries. Tawwab believes that emotional struggles like anxiety and trauma are inevitable parts of life, but through boundary setting and direct conversation, people can better cope with these challenges. Try this. Create a boundary statement card by writing a clear, specific boundary on an index card or sticky note using I statements. For example, write, I need quiet time from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. for sleep. Please avoid calling or texting during these hours. Place the card in a visible spot like your desk or your refrigerator to remind yourself of the boundary. Practice reading it out loud to get comfortable expressing it. Share it with a trusted friend for support, and then use it when you need it to set the boundary in real situations. Also, on her website, which I will give in our Facebook community, she has a feeling identification worksheet that you can download. It talks about different feelings and asks you when you were overwhelmed, frustrated, embarrassed. And then it'll ask you questions like, what feeling do you feel the most often? What feeling is the most difficult for you to feel? One little worksheet, but it's a powerful tool. 8. Developing emotional agility. Susan David is a respected psychologist and author recognized for her innovative research on emotional intelligence and resilience. As a faculty member at Harvard Medical School and co founder of the Institute of Coaching at McLean Hospital, she helps people tackle life challenges with emotional agility. Throughout her TED Talk, Susan David stresses the value of emotional agility, or the ability to acknowledge and accept our feelings without allowing them to rule us. David suggests using emotions as a guide to live truly and make deliberate, adaptable decisions rather than trying to avoid discomfort. By confronting challenges with openness and clarity, this approach helps build resilience and leads to a more fulfilling and purposeful life. Try this, the emotion and action reflection exercise. This will help you link your emotional experiences with practical actions for better clarity and control. So start by finding a quiet place, if possible, where you can focus and have a notebook ready. Think about a recent situation that triggered a strong emotion, such as frustration or joy. Write down the specific emotion you felt and what triggered it. Reflect on how you responded. Did your actions align with your values? Then consider other ways you could have reacted and choose one to implement. Finally, after using your new approach, reflect on how it affected your emotional state and the situation. So here's an example. I like making lists. So, emotion, anxiety, trigger, unexpected work deadline, current response, worked late into the night, feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Alternative action, break the task into smaller parts and tackle each part methodically. Set specific times to work on each part and take regular breaks. Action plan. Next time an unexpected deadline arises, I will outline the task into smaller, manageable parts, schedule specific times to work on each part, and ensure I take breaks to manage stress. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but rather a natural part of the human experience. It calls for courage and self awareness, allowing us to embrace the uncertainties and emotional risks that life presents. Without leaning on religious or spiritual assurances, we're left to explore vulnerability in its raw form, trusting our own capacity to grow, connect, and navigate through life's complexities. By practicing mindfulness, challenging negative beliefs, cultivating self compassion, and nurturing trust in relationships, we can become more comfortable with vulnerability. Whether it's through small acts of openness or creative expression, we can gradually allow ourselves to be seen, heard, and understood, leading to more authentic relationships and personal fulfillment. Vulnerability is hard, especially in the climate we're living in. So choose one of these activities and let us know which one you choose and try in the None But Curious Facebook community. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you like it and leave a review so that other people can find it. And until next time, stay open, stay vulnerable.